Well, good afternoon and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to murky north coast of Ireland. Not a particularly conducive day weather-wise and light-wise to be out making images, and for the most part I would agree, but then again conditions like this where you have sort of subtle lights, no real sort of harsh highlights and lower contrast can sometimes be the perfect time to maybe look for the more intimate scene. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping to do today. Now, as is always the case with little intimate scenes, there's never the guarantee. I chose this location because I did make an image here a couple of years ago that I quite liked and had hoped there would be sort of similar scenes to be had along the coastline here, so you never know, but it's certainly not a day for the bigger vista view. So what we'll be looking for is a little bit more sort of intimate views, maybe some sort of abstracty views, maybe playing about a little bit with the waves and some longer exposure, but generally just looking for those smaller scenes. There's also, just out behind me here somewhere, they've dipped down now. Oh no, they're actually out just here in the little bay. Not sure whether, in fact, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to pick that up, but a couple of seals as well. So there you go. If nothing else, we saw a couple of seals. Well, you probably didn't, I did. Anyway, let's go dandering and see whether we can find at least one little intimate scene to make work today. So there's one thing that I need to remind myself every time that I'm out looking at the intimate shot, and that's to really slow down. For me, the intimate shot could be in an area no bigger than a handprint. And so you can't just go stomping through or at least I can't go stomping through the landscape and hope that I'm going to find what I'm looking for. And what quite often I'll need to do is walk up and down the same location 2 or 3 times. It might not yield anything, but I know I'm going to have a better chance of seeing something than simply just stomping on past. Now, I've spoken about this a huge number of times on this channel, and that's be careful not to go out with too many expectations, because I guess you get expected results. And I came down here with a thought in mind of the type of image I was going to go for, and that was those sort of dried out bits of kelp, maybe overlaid some vibrant colours or maybe overlaid some stone. And while I'm not discounting that, I've also got to be careful that I'm not just looking for that as well, just because I got an image down here that was like that before. Now the light, we started off with average to poor light, and now we're getting to the point where it's poor to very poor. It's brighter kind of out on the coast, but where the sun is kind of, if you could see it, it's looking a bit more murky, and we're actually losing what light there was. Now, hopefully it won't make too much of a major difference here, but nice just if it was a little bit lighter, I must admit. But we'll wander on, taking our time as we go, and see whether we can find something. So I've actually brought myself all the way along to a little harbour called Port Braddon, and it's at this point that I'm going to now start walking back towards my starting point. Still haven't found anything. Slowly walking, sort of eyeing up a few potentials, but not even bothering getting the camera out. And of course this can be, as I said at the start of the vlog, this can be one of the things, you have an idea in your head and you hope that because you're looking for a more intimate scene, maybe there's going to be many more opportunities, but it's very difficult. So not really found anything yet. Been walking for about an hour and a half or so. So I'll start slowly making my way back towards the car, and fingers crossed, we can find even one image. Otherwise we might have to rename this channel Nigel's Dark and Dingy Coastal Walks or something. A catchy title. The waves are actually making some lovely patterns. Or the wind, on top of the water is making some lovely patterns. Be quite nice for a drone. But anyway, we'll wander back and we'll see whether we can pick something up on the return line. Okay, so may have found something. Walking back along this rocky beach, and there was a brighter sort of flash in the corner of my eye, and it was a little bit of that dried kelp. And I think what really made it stand out was it really was bleached bright against the darker stone. Now, I haven't yet lined up a composition, and I'm also being very careful where I stand, because I have history and form on this where nature has provided me with a very nice shape, and then I go and stand on it. And of course, we as humans just cannot compete with Mother Nature when it comes to creating beautiful natural shapes. So I'm going to go back to see whether I can line up a bit of a composition, and then we'll chat again in a moment. Try not to step on it. Now, I have a couple of choices here. The shape itself is, the bit of kelp itself is in a kind of a Y shape. And if I sort of zoom out a little bit, probably at about 35mm, hang on a minute, this is very uncomfortable. Oh, if I zoom out a bit, I can get a little bit more of the Y shape, but that does bring into play a couple more of the rocks. And of course, what really appealed to me was the bleached nature of the bit of kelp set against the darker rock. So I think actually, rather than it having that sort of Y shape, I'm just going to try to focus on seeing whether I can line up a composition that just has the kelp cutting through the rock itself. Now, the other thing that's quite appealing, at least in my eye, on the actual bit of rock itself, there's a little tiny bit of a fissure in there as well, and that's just breaking up the uniform nature of the rock, which I think, from my perspective, helps. But still struggling quite a lot with the composition, because I think what works best from the kelp's point of view is if I pull out just slightly, but then I start to get some of the curves off the stone, and I can't really include all of the holes to the shape of the stone. And then if I sort of zoom in to remove those curves, I think I lose some of the natural beauty of that kelp. And of course, because I am so kind of zoomed in, I'm out at about 100mm. Even the smallest of variations with the camera can dramatically change the composition. So I think this is going to be one that's going to get the old grey matter going, but that's what I quite like about these intimate scenes. Right, back to trying to work something out. Okay, so I think I've worked out a composition, and I've actually gone, well, I've worked on a couple of compositions. I have done one just with the kelp sort of cutting through the stone, and then I've slightly gone a little bit wider, which actually introduces a little bit more of the shape of the kelp, but also some of those background rocks or those surrounding rocks. Now, I am focus stacking this, and I'm not sure how many images I've taken focus stacked, but clearly out at sort of 100mm, I wouldn't have been able to get the depth of field that I wanted. Now, around the edges of the image, the frame that I included more of the surrounding rocks, if I haven't been able to get full depth of field because there's maybe a couple of inches, some of those rocks sort of lower down, I'm already thinking that I'll probably put a little bit of a vignette around this image and darken the edges, so it probably won't matter too much that maybe there's a little bit of a loss of depth of field on the edges. Obviously the main thing that I want to bring through is the texture in both the rock and also in the kelp. I've been toing and froing over a certain decision not to fall over would be good, and that's to potentially upgrade my camera. And a scene like this, I would love to see it sort of the texture, the sort of, I think, and of course I'm talking about the old GFX here. Anyone want to buy a camper van? I think the GFX really would come into its own in scenes like this. I think I spoke about this in my Santiago del Mar sort of little wander around the dark streets, where I was taking the image off that sort of door frame, and again the texture and the bark and the door and the grain of the door. I would love to see what a medium format camera would do with that. But for now we've got the old trusty XT4, and I think maybe I prefer the second image with the slightly wider field of view. I'm still not 100% happy with this, and I may carry on sort of fine-tuning another few bits and pieces in it, but it might be one that foxes me in the end, gets away from me. But at least on the way back to the car, we've been able to find at least one image. Right, I'll throw a couple of the frames up that I've taken of this, and then we'll wander on. Who would have thought it years ago that on a dull Tuesday afternoon I could have spent 90 minutes or so with a bit of dried kelp and a couple of rocks. The wonderfulness of photography, eh? Now, one of the kind of worrying things, or it's always a little bit of a worry until you get home, is the fact that you're focus stacking. And quite often I overcompensate the focus stacking by taking many more than I actually need to, because how often have we got back to the digital darkroom only to realise that we've missed somewhere? It'd be really great to have reliable automatic focus stacking, and I think the Fuji X-T4 does do some semblance of kind of automatic focus stacking, but again, it's what you really want is you want some software in there that will actually sort of give you some sort of signify where it's kind of focused. But anyway, I'm rambling now. But yeah, so I spent a good 90 minutes there just hunched over trying a few different compositions, and hopefully at least one of them has worked out. I was surprised actually that the horizontal framing, I thought it was always going to be portrait, but there was a horizontal one in there also. So well, I'm going to carry on wandering slowly, see whether we can maybe find one more image. But it's always pleasing when you get at least one, albeit not quite sure how it's come out yet. But I like that. I love the texture of the rocks, so hopefully that comes out in that. And if it doesn't, shall I just go buy a GFX? No, it's the photographer's fault. It's not the camera, Nigel. Come on. Right, enough jabbering. I'm probably missing some other frames here, so I shall carry on looking. Well guys, I think that's probably going to be it. Intimate scenes were few and far between, but at least we managed to see one. As I say, not sure whether it's worked out from a final image perspective, but always good when you see an image at least, even if perhaps you haven't done it justice with the old pixel box. Oh, well, that's been a very pleasant 4 or so hours out bimbling along the Causeway coast, reacquainting myself with the area as well, and hopefully making the most of overcast conditions. The rest of this week looks pretty overcast as well, and I really wanted to make sure that I carried on getting out and about. So I think it's going to be similar sorts of outings for the next few days at least. But once again, thanks for following along, and I guess we'll catch up next time. And until then, take care. Bye bye.